Stephen Greenblatt is an American scholar who is credited with establishing New Historicism as a literary methodology. He is influenced by Michel Foucault and Raymond Williams largely. Stephen Greenblatt, in his introduction to Renaissance self-fashioning, More to Shakespeare, discussed Renaissance self-fashioning. For the convenience, this essay can be divided into four segments. In the first part, Greenblatt discusses Renaissance self-fashioning definition and its dynamics. In the second segment, Greenblatt discusses role of literature in exploring self-fashioning in the 16th century. In the third segment, he focuses on six particular authors' unique self-fashioning. Lastly, Greenblatt focuses on 10 governing factors in respect to Renaissance self-fashioning. Now, what is self-fashioning, particularly Renaissance self-fashioning? Self-fashioning, according to Greenblatt, is the process of constructing or asserting one's identity or public persona in accordance with one's social role or position. In other words, such self-fashioning of a persona follows certain set-up models in society. In upper class, particularly 16th century upper class, noblemen used to attire themselves with finest clothings and attempted to be well versed in art, literature, and other cultural spheres. Women of aristocratic society followed the model of a noble, virtuous woman. And this is quite evident in the portraits of Renaissance times as well. During the Renaissance times, if you look at the portraits, you can see the noblemen used to show themselves as vigorous, wealthy persons by wearing fine clothes and armor. Women desired to look beautiful and elegant and virtuous, and they wore heavy jewelry. But one significant factor, rather condition, in regard to Renaissance self-fashioning was to present oneself comfortable with the fashion, as the fashion code was supposed to reflect the social respectability. The subjects had to act in an unaffected manner. Greenblatt opens his essay by pointing out that in the 16th century England, both individual selves and saints could be fashioned. People enjoyed less freedom because they wanted to pose themselves whatever they were not in the process of self fashioning. And this happened because of the pressure of family, religious institutions, and also the state. And because of this self fashioning, autonomy was compromised, and there was instead the power that tried to control the identity of individuals. In Christianity, self fashioning is condemned. Why? Because self fashioning involves molding one's true self. And that is why Stephen Greenblatt has quoted one line by St. Augustine: try to build up yourself and you build a ruin. If you try to create your own identity differently, you are destroying your own actual self. In fact, this word fashion came into being during the times of Chaucer. In 16th century, the word became popular with the meaning forming oneself. It meant molding a distinctive personality through a consistent mode of perceiving and behaving. Initially, that model was Christ, following the path of Christ and his characteristics. But later, in the times of Renaissance, this self fashioning followed different directions, and the manners of higher class and their codes came into being. Now, literature according to Greenblatt, is a document of history. As a proponent of New Historicism, he strongly claimed that literature can serve as a document of history. And he is pointing out that in exploring the dimensions of Renaissance self fashioning, this literature can play a significant role. By analyzing the contemporary literature, literary biography, one can explore the ideological dimensions, superstructures, and historical background in relation to Renaissance self fashioning. Now, Greenblatt focuses on six authors of 16th century England who deviated from the contemporary accepted models of self fashionings and established as powerful instances of Renaissance self fashionings and influential ones as well. These six authors are Thomas More, Edmund Spenser, Christopher Marlowe, William Shakespeare, Tyndall, and Thomas Watt. Greenblatt talks about three particular mobilities relatable to these six authors: social or economic mobility, geographical and ideological mobility, and restless mobility. Social or economic mobility can be related to Thomas More, Edmund Spenser, Christopher Marlowe, William Shakespeare, because they had humble background and they rose to prosperity because of their talents. Tyndale is an example of geographical and ideological mobility, as he traversed from being a Catholic priest to Protestant. Watt's life is an example of relentless, restless mobility, as he traveled widely in several parts of Europe. Greenblatt talks about the ideological shifts involved with these six authors, and based on the unique self fashionings relatable to these six authors, based on their characters, characteristics, and their own life stories, Greenblatt has pointed out six governing factors of Renaissance self fashioning. First, none of the figures inherits a title, except for Thomas Watt. These remaining five authors had humble backgrounds. Second, submission to an absolute power or authority. Apart from Christopher Marlowe, these five authors often submitted themselves or their characters to some higher authority or absolute power. If you look at Shakespeare's texts, you can clearly find out that sometimes Shakespeare wanted to appease Elizabeth I or James I. Third, self fashioning is achieved in relation to something perceived as alien, strange, or hostile. When someone is trying to self fashion himself, he is trying to become someone who he is not. So he is transcending the boundary of his actual identity and trying to become someone else. Four, the alien is perceived by the authority either as that which is unformed or chaotic. So the authority would perceive the alien as a chaotic being who is creating disturbances, or unformed, not properly formed yet. Number five, one man's authority is another man's alien. There is a conflicting relation. Number six, when one authority or alien is destroyed, another takes its place. You can think this concept in terms of oppressor oppressed binary, or dominant force and submissive force binary. So when a submissive force becomes a subversive force, when the subversion happens, the dominant force becomes the submissive one. Number seven, there is always more than one authority and more than one alien in existence at a given time. So there are a number of this authority alien binaries, not one. Number 8, if both the authority and the alien are located outside the self, they are at the same time experienced as inward necessities, so that both submission and destruction are always already internalized. So if you look at this sort of relation between authority and the alien, that conflict goes on within the self and beyond the self as well. Number 9, self fashioning is always, though not exclusively, in language. If you think in terms of literature, this is obvious. Self fashioning is portrayed through words, literally words. But if you look at the portraits as well, portraits of 16th century, the way they wanted to pose themselves, they tried to follow a language, the language of accepted social norms or roles. So self fashioning happens always in terms of language. Number 10, the power generated to attack the alien in the name of authority is produced in excess and threatens the authority it sets out to defend. So, whenever an alien tries to form a subversive force, the authority tries to suppress that. This subversive force and suppressive force, this binary is well explained in Stephen Greenblatt's introductory essay to The Power of Forms in English Renaissance as well.